Susie Kim Riley is the founder and chief executive of Aquto. She's that rare thing, a real serial entrepreneur with real success behind her. Her latest venture is Aquto, which is the leader in sponsored data with ops in US, Europe, and Asia. She was also previously the CMO of Tekelec, which was acquired under Susie's careful management by Oracle, and prior to that, she supervised the acquisition of Camient. She is a disruptive player in mobile marketing, rest assured, and we expect her to live up to that reputation. And finally, last but not least, it's a real pleasure to introduce Lou Pascalis, who's the SVP, Enterprise Media Exec, Bank of America. Hey, Lou. Oh. He oversees media strategy and investment across traditional digital and social channels. He led the team that delivered a game-changing 360-degree program around the World Economic Forum, and also led the paid media strategy for the bank's very successful Red partnership that pulled U2, which is a famous pop group, maybe a little while ago, with the Super Bowl, a little bit more current maybe, with the power of Twitter, iAd, Clear Channel, and Facebook, and was also recognized with a medal at the Cannes Advertising Festival. There's a whole lot more to talk to you about Lou, but I'm going to let Lou do some talking for himself. But what I want to emphasize is that what we are bringing right across this panel is a combination, and I'm speaking specifically to Lou here, of innovation and impact. This is what we want in the business. So I'm going to start by throwing a question straight at Lou. The tension between advertising and utility has been building up, and the conversation about that has been growing over the last 3 to 4 years, I'd say, Lou. You've been addressing that issue, I think probably a little bit at Amex and certainly at B of A. Could you give us your thoughts on that? I'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah, thank you. I love that question. I really appreciate that, Michael. I like to say, to just be a provocateur, that we are at the beginning of the post-advertising era. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the confluence of things, we're moving into an environment where brands are going to engage with consumers in mobile. I think, David, you're exactly right. I think that a correlate to a lot of what Mary just presented with the trust-building stair-step is about having real value for consumers on their mobile device, because let's face it, this is the most personal, insert prop here. This is the most personal, most relevant communications device in the history of mankind, right? And it's a brand value reappraisal device for marketers. If your brand doesn't deliver value in this context, someone is disintermediating you right now. And when we think about engaging consumers in this device from an advertising mindset, we are limiting what the definition of marketing is. And so I feel like this is the renaissance of marketing. I share what David is saying. We have so much more signal set here. We have so many more opportunities to create real utility. A brief anecdote. I was riding in an elevator the other day, and Pandora Music sent me an offer for tickets for a band that I have a lot of on my Pandora. And I thought, what a brilliant extension for a brand. It's within their permission set. It adds real value. I'm not annoyed because in a curated context. It's the personalization that Mary's video talked about. That's the bar marketers need to aspire to. That's the thing that will allow us to really become more relevant in people's lives and ultimately compete for attention, because we are now competing, this is my last comment, we're now competing with every consumer who has become a publisher in the social era. And so all those cat videos from Aunt Sally that seem, somewhat laughable, highly relevant to her friends and family. How do we compete? By providing greater utility, not by targeting better ads.
Lou, could I ask you a question? Can I do that, Michael?
Come on in. Great.
You've heard the kind of ditty that people say mobile advertising is like teenage sex.
Everybody's talking.
Everyone's talking about it. Not a lot of people are doing it. As a marketer and the guy with the money on the panel, literally, you're the marketer and you work for a financial services institution, so you actually have money. What percentage of the marketers are actually, what do you think?
I think it's changing in real time. I think when you and I had this conversation a year ago, it was probably a different answer. I think everyone's on a journey to figure it out. And I think, again, if you can build, we've run a lot of ads in mobile, even though I like to sit here and say it's the end of the advertising era. But we try to create a relevant context for the World Economic Forum, which is very important to the banking community, we're taking social currency right out of there by following Christine Lagarde, and when she says something on a stage, we put that into an ads unit and allow people to engage with that. So we get permission from people to follow them. We push it out in real time, and we're essentially using ad inventory as notification for content you're interested in. So it's a matter of rethinking. I guess my answer is this. Those marketers who are taking the banner baggage of the digital era and trying to fit it into a smaller device are going to lose really big. Those marketers who are riding a different set of rails, a different set of calculus to say, how can I add value to every experience for consumers, are going to win really big. And I think more people are doing that today than ever before.
I'd add to that if I can. I'd say great content is great advertising, and great advertising is great content. I checked the figures on our YouTube ads leaderboard a year ago. 4 out of the 10 most shared videos were ads. Because actually, when consumers are in control, there are amazing pieces of ad content that consumers want to watch. But the point is, they're in control. They've got the choice of whether to watch, they've got the choice of when to watch, and it's got to be relevant because it's a really, really personal device. So great content is great advertising.
I do agree that the traditional way of thinking around marketing and just taking, for example, TV ads and putting them on mobile is not really the right way to tackle it. And I think a lot of people had been thinking, well, those TV ad dollars should really go to mobile and it should be the same sort of ads. And I don't think that works.
Right.
So I think a lot of the new ways, like making ads sort of almost user-generated, where they're interacting with the brand, those are some of the creative things you can do when you're really using and leveraging the power of the mobile.
I agree.
Let's talk about an environment. And Susie, I want to come straight back to you on this. We've talked a lot about the explosion of mobile video, and of course it's absolutely correct, but there is a price to be paid for that, isn't there? And there are users with limited data plans. There is still, whatever we're saying up here, I'm afraid I still have to remind you that the value exchange between consumer and brand in any form of marketing always has a question mark over it. It's never a slam dunk. Can you talk to that, particularly in terms of what you guys are doing?
Well, so what we do is actually we engage with brands on one side of our business, and on the other side, we integrate with carriers, and we enable users to engage with mobile content free of data charges, or enable brands to actually give a value exchange and give data to users in exchange, again, for engaging with the brand. I know that in the US, for example, and most of Western Europe, people have data plans. But what we find is that people are actively curbing. At any point in time, about 60% of users are trying not to use their cellular data so you can hop onto Wi-Fi and avoid those overages. And so because of that sensitivity, what we find is that when content can be delivered to the user free of data charges, the content engagement goes up 2 or 3-fold. And outside of these developed countries, what we're finding is that in many places, more than half of users with smartphones don't actually have data plans. So what we've seen there is if you can basically remove the friction of data connectivity, meaning enable users to engage with content, an app, piece of video, without having to worry about whether they even have a data plan, we think is a huge compelling use case for brands.
Yeah. And I want to flip an aspect of that conversation across to Mary, because there is built into that. That is part and parcel to some extent of the consumer trust issue. And when she was presenting, Mary, when you were presenting the research that you just published today on that subject, I wanted to throw a two-pronged question at you. First of all, what is the basis for that drop in trust that we're seeing? Is that relatively recent? And secondly, what underpins that? Trust is never quite as simple as trust in my experience. Wrapped into it are issues of relative value, relative risk, and things like that. First of all, what does that drop in trust look like? And there's a sting in the tail, but I might save that one for you, which is, do consumers actually care enough about any of this for trust to even enter the equation?
I'm going to answer the second one first.
Sure.
They only care when it really bothers them, right? I mean, if I get angry, if it's annoying, if it's unwelcome, if it's somehow making me feel at risk, you know, if I get something, if I get a push message from an app or from a brand that I don't remember signing up for, that is not timely, that is annoying, perhaps a little eerie as well. You know, there's that whole creepy factor. I think that's where things start to go off the rails. But if it's welcome, in Lou's example, that's exactly what we're talking about. So the trust change that I think we attribute that drop to in the last 3 years, while I think, there's absolutely a circumstance where I know that I've used and changed my behavior of my device over the last 3 years. It becomes more and more of an integrated part of my life. So therefore, my 193 minutes that I talked about 3 years ago, my data service wasn't as good. I wasn't necessarily doing the same things. So we've seen increase in data usage. We've seen increase in the way in which we interact and change our own behavior to interact with our device. So I think as we evolve as consumers, as individuals utilizing your device, it changes and raises a greater level of awareness of, wait a minute, I'm on this all the time. And I am interacting with everybody on this. So how do I make sure that they all know where I am. My mobile operator knows where I am all the time. A lot of brands know where I am all the time. Right. What are they doing with that data? How can I make that, because I will care if I can get something out of it. I mean, that's what I always come back to. You know, it's that value proposition, right? I will do a lot of things if I know I'm going to get something good out of it that I want. So I care if it makes me unhappy, but I also care if it can make me happy. And if it can make me happy, I may be a little bit more trusting. I may be a little bit more willing, to do that.
And I think what moves with that is the expectation set, right?
Totally.
So what was good enough today from a marketer in mobile is not going to be good enough tomorrow,
right.
and so on. And so we're going to have to figure out context. So Mary and I shared a nice 2-hour ride over here like everybody else did today. So we basically had this panel in the van.
We did. It was really good.
And one of the we were talking about the importance of context in mobile. And you had a great example that picks up on Susie's theme about bandwidth. You know, if somebody's on LTE or 4G, don't serve them a video. Figure out a different way to serve a message than video, right? How do we figure that out and pick up that aspect of context so that we're not annoying people? We're giving them something that they'll consume in that environment. I thought that was a great way to think about context beyond.
I think there's two things to take off of what Mary said and as well Lou's commentary. You talk about the trust issue. I think it's about transparency. I think if we do a better job as an industry of giving transparency and visibility to the consumer as to how and why this information is being sent to you, pushed to you, I think we'll go a long way towards making the consumer more comfortable. I find that in every industry. We focus on it in the media industry, and this is something that's rampant in the media industry today around transparency and trust. Right. Those two words have become interchangeable in my view, and it's an area that you can't lose sight of, number one. And number two, I totally agree with the value exchange, and I think the advertising industry, the marketing industry, has not done itself the right service. The marketing industry needs to do a better job of communicating that quid pro quo, that value exchange to the consumer.
And of course, behind that, Mike, sits the shift of power to the consumer. He who has the power determines what is valuable, and that's
security.
Exactly.
So I think the point that Lou was making earlier about the experience of not serving a video, I think is really important. There was a recent New York Times article that said in the US, the average consumer spends up to $9.50 worth of their data plan on ads, primarily video ads. So, think about what that really does to the user. We've actually done a lot of A/B testing, and what we've seen is that when users are faced with having to engage with a video, meaning there's video playing, and they know that they're on cellular data and it's eating up their data plan, that they're actually much more likely to abandon the content because they do not want it to chew up their data plan. And then also with all this ad blocking, why do you think that people are blocking ads, right? It's because it's a poor user experience. Why is it a poor user experience? Well, there's latency because it's fetching things from lots of different places. But in addition, it's also chewing up your bandwidth. So I think that ad blocking is a major issue for the industry. And there's a lot of companies now that are trying to counter that by saying you cannot view my content unless you turn off ad blocking. And on mobile today, there's not a lot of ad blocking going on, although obviously Apple with the new OS enables you to do that quite easily. but I think it's going to become an increasing problem.
Can we before we get into a big conversation about ad blocking, I think as a symptom of what we're talking about, it's really important. But I would imagine that many of us here are possibly attending other forums in this environment where we'll go into ad blocking in nauseating detail. The fact of the matter is, and we talked about this yesterday, Suze, I think ad blocking is quite possibly one of the better things to have happened to the industry, because it's a big tap on the shoulder in terms of need to rethink your game. I want to actually...
I'd just add to that, if that's okay. So I'd just say, I think the important thing on this, not to throw the online advertising baby out with the bathwater. And I think the really important thing is give consumers the choice. On mobile, consumers want to be in control. That's exactly what we've been trying to do with YouTube. So on YouTube, with TrueView ads, users can choose to skip them if they don't want to watch them. Effectively, the ads then become self-targeting over and above anything the marketer can do. You only ever need to watch 5 seconds, then you can choose to skip.
And the nice thing is you only charge the advertiser if the user is actually watching the ad.
And so it works for everybody. The value exchange is right, because consumers can choose if they don't want to watch them. Advertisers only get charged if a consumer chooses to watch or engages. And so then the value exchange is right. That's got to be a good thing.
Trust and value, however, are luxuries that very much belong to trading in the developed world. I want to flip the conversation briefly, if I could, and say, and I'm sure all of you, one way or another, will echo this, our biggest advertisers are typically our biggest FMCG brands. Almost all of them are seeing a slowing down of growth in the developed world, a slowing down of brand equity, and a real challenge in terms of engagement. They are looking to emerging markets. The question of how mobile marketing and mobile advertising, I'd like to separate those two things with a dotted line between them. The question of how that works in emerging markets, for a start, thanks for picking up on that, Michael, the value exchange is going to be entirely different. The technological environment, the sociological environment, the cultural environment, and indeed the attitude to consumer goods is going to be entirely different. What is Google looking at in that area, David? Do you have any thoughts on that subject, whether it's Google or just yourself?
I'd say more broadly. So to my talk, the important thing is how do you keep up with the consumer? So the interesting thing, of course, around emerging market consumers is they were mobile-first markets.
Yeah, but they are also struggling with an infrastructure. We don't see a great deal of 4G in those environments.
There's a whole load of investment going in to improve that infrastructure.
There is indeed, but is that going to happen in time for the world's biggest advertisers to be able to capitalize on growth opportunities in those markets using mobile?
Right, so the reality is the world's biggest advertisers are already using mobile and other tools to connect with consumers in those markets. That's exactly what we're seeing.
But presumably using quite different strategies, I would imagine.
In some cases using video, so there are whole swathes of consumers who are on faster internet connections. In other cases using different techniques on mobile and other platforms as well.
A lot of the times they do offline, online type of transactions as well, where a marketer would give people actually like coupons that they can use to engage with content on mobile, and they can use those coupons to actually get extra data on their mobile devices. So they come up with different mechanisms to actually engage the user that are quite different from sort of Western techniques.
Yeah, I mean,
Michael.
Years ago, this is almost 10 years ago, Virgin Mobile, back in those days, launched something called Sugar Mama, which was basically, the working title was ads for minutes.
Yep.
On restricted plans, they were, it's an old story, I'll give you minutes if you watch my ad. So this is not a new phenomena, it's a frequent flyer program.
It's a value exchange.
It's a value exchange.
But what's so important about that is you've just involved the operator in the value stream. So to the third world, this developing countries discussion, as soon as you introduce the fact that the operator can gain a revenue stream into this, they have a totally different mindset associated with how they look at brands. Right now, they are not a part of the revenue stream, really. They're kind of outside of it. So to the extent that an operator can, in the case of sponsored data, can have a role and then actually have insight into the usage of that subscriber. So some of the stuff I know that Susie does, when you can share back to an operator and you can say branded content was looked at and was paid for by you as a brand, and now the operator has some part of that revenue stream, the way they look at data usage, the way they look at the way in which the consumer behaves is a completely different thing. Today, and this is where I think we have to change, there's probably got to be some more meeting of the minds here where the operator can be a part of this revenue stream, because we are getting to an issue where, 3 just announced that they're going to do ad blocking, right? They're going to do it in the UK and in Italy. So how do you, for them, it's actually going to make consumers happy, so it's a satisfaction issue for them. And they're just completely, it's no skin off their nose. They're not making any money off of that.
So I think in mobile, it really has to be a win-win-win approach.
That's right.
Where there's got to be something in it for a brand, and there's got to be something in it for operators, as well as obviously something in it for the consumer. And so if you can basically make the experience a very nice one for the consumer by making sure that the consumer is not incurring overages and data charges, that's a win for the consumer. And it's actually a very good feeling back towards the brand, because consumers know that the brands are taking care of them.
At its most core level, that's the fundamental shift, right? Because advertising by its nature is disruptive. What we need to do as marketers now is to join conversations, is to add value to experiences, to enhance what people are doing, either with VR and AR or additional information. And we need to think about, how do I pick up the signal set to understand the environment, to understand the need state, the mindset, and the motivation, and have that offer, that message, that compelling utility ready to go at a moment's notice. And so it's a storehouse of evergreen, always on, versus a campaign mindset that has a start, a middle, and an end. So we really have to reorient from disrupt to invest and join conversations to add value.
Lou, on that subject, how have your, as a driver of impact through innovation in the organization, to what degree are there hot and cold spots in your dialogues with the operators right now?
The biggest issue, really, when you think about it, is a redefinition of what ROI is, right? So I like to talk about moving from a transaction mindset to a relationship mindset. Instead of winning the individual engagement with an ad that someone clicks on, how do we start to think about this person over a lifetime? Now, again, I'm in banking. I have 9 core products, many of which, home loans, car loans, checking, savings. I'll come in and out of people's lives at multiple times. And so it's important for me to be in a relationship. But I dare say it's important for every marketer to be in a relationship with that customer set. And so it's really redefining ROI based on lifetime value of the customer, and thinking about every interaction as being accretive to the relationship. So a lot of advertising theory is do no harm to the relationships, put an ad out there. I would say you need to change that conversation to do some good for the relationship. That's a big pivot.
And Lou, you talked about advertising being, interrupting and whatnot. The inspired marketers, and I consider you to be one of those, are looking at not even using the word advertising any longer, but to the point, content.
Yeah.
And one of the driving forces that we see with world-class marketers really is trying to figure out around content the creation, distribution, and monetization of content on whatever platform. But back to the 193 minutes, it better be on this platform or you're in trouble. But that is really at the core, I think, of what the marketers need to be doing. They need to be creating that compelling content. As you said, David, the amount of YouTube videos that are shared overwhelmingly is marketing, and so it still works as content.
Yeah, and it's got to be quality content, and it's got to be, it's got to have real narrative to it, right? It needs to be in the mindset of the customer, not long-form advertising. Content is not long-form advertising. The idea that 4 of the top 10 YouTube videos that were, from a shareability standpoint, were brand advertising is great, because I guarantee you they were all stories. They were all pieces with a rich narrative that had some provocative and compelling thing, and that led to a larger story that if you did a little Google search, you'd find more to that story. That's the way that we have to think.
I think that comes back to that theme of how do you really understand all of the moments that matter to your consumers? How do you reach them in a really targeted way so that you're getting the right messages to the right people at the right time? How do you deliver real impact? That's what great content really does. And then how do you measure the business results?
Does anybody, we're short on time, does anybody in the audience have a burning question that they would like to put to the panel before we finish? I want to make sure we don't overrun too much. Can we have a microphone over to this gentleman in the front here, please? Can we have a microphone up to this gentleman at the front, please?
We can just repeat the question.
Just shout it, and let's shout it.
We all are fans of YouTube. I have nothing against YouTube. And
Not that loud.
But are you scared from the move that Facebook is always making to move the immersive video experience?
So, thank you. My question is for Google is, are you scared from the continuous improvement that Facebook is making to make their video engagement more immersive than YouTube? And we did in our agency a small test. We put the same video on Facebook. One was embedded within.
Can you keep the question short, please?
Link.
Short question.
The one that was embedded got more engagement than the link. So, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. Look, we've got
Quick
loads.
answer, please, David.
Yeah, we've got loads of amazing examples of more and more video content performing amazingly well on YouTube. I say, look, there's going to be a load of innovation in this space. That's got to be a good thing, hasn't it? And I think video on mobile is going to get more and more immersive. And so have a play with your cardboards. It's an amazing device that turns every video, every mobile phone into a virtual reality headset. That's got to be pretty cool.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, David, Susie, and Lou. Ladies and gentlemen, huge round of applause, please, for the panel.